Hey everybody, this is Bevin. Welcome to Bevin, a femme over 40 and her friends podcast. I'm your host, Bevin. I've said my name 3 times. It's time to start the show. I'm so excited to bring Lisa Snyder back on the podcast. In my brain, I thought she had last been on the podcast in 2022, but it turns out it was November 2020, which is like a whole lifetime ago. Like the entire world has changed and flipped on its head a million times since then. And I'm really excited to have her back talking about what she's doing in the legal psilocybin space. Like, I think it's really, I just have so much gratitude for everyone who made it possible for me to legally use the plant medicines that I enjoy. Just going to say that. But she goes through the entire process of what it looks like to hire a facilitator to have in many ways, like some people describe using psychedelics for healing as like 6 years of therapy in one sitting, just so possible, right? And like it's just the rewiring of your brain and an openness to cradle the truth. This has kind of been my journey recently. It's just like the plant medicine helps me hold space for what the truth is, and I've done so much healing work around shame. Like, I don't have shame around the truth. I just have acceptance of the truth. And then, a willingness to pursue joy in the present moment and whatever I want to facilitate my future. So I'm really excited for you to hear from Lisa. And I also want to tell you the best way to support this podcast is through my Patreon page. And I have some changes that I've made to the tiers that have to do with spiritual lessons and learning. I've been getting a lot of guidance, both through people and through my spiritual connection, that I need to be teaching more classes on spirituality. And frankly, I did not want to start a new platform for something. I was like, let's just roll it into Patreon because I already had spiritual self care lessons on there. So those are now moving into the spiritual lessons tier on Patreon. So Patreon is a membership support site that allows folks like you to support creators like me that make work that you love. And just, to enable my free things to exist in the world. I have a podcast and a blog that are free and available, chock full of information that can help people live a better life. I think, humbly, you take what you like and leave the rest. But also, membership at any level includes all of my Zoom aerobics classes. I teach Fat Kid Dance Party Aerobics, which is for anyone of any size who has ever felt too awkward or has been called too fat or too much and wants to dance. I mean, but minimum participation is showing up and cheering along. So you could just want to cheer along and regard yourself with love and grace. My work product is joy. I love teaching these aerobics and I love helping people feel better in their bodies and experience different levels of care for themselves. And I also have other things in there. Just, it's a safe space for me to create and offer things. And so I teach a lot about how I use my spirituality. This is really how I've developed my spiritual practice, is learning from other people and then folding it into the batter, right? Of like how I live my life spiritually. And so I'm writing an oracle deck right now. So I'm including those writings in that tier and teaching some classes that are kind of unfolding. And that will all be included in that tier. So right now there's already at least 4 hours of content on that tier, just from me porting it from the general tier to that tier, and then I'm adding to it. So it's going to be really fun. I'm really excited to see who wants to develop with me. But then also I have an on-demand tier, which that does already include that tier. It's $25 a month, which is less than the cost of one Soul Cycle class. It is all so much on-demand content for aerobics classes. And I have grief stretches. I just did a series of stretches for specific purposes, like a road trip break stretch, stretches for relief of back pain and knee pain and things like that. So, and like a whole morning stretch series. So there's a lot of cool stuff in that membership tier. If you feel so moved to support this work, that's here to support you. So thank you for being here. Thanks for tuning in. And I hope you enjoy this episode with Lisa. Welcome back to the podcast, Lisa.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. I appreciate being here. Excited to connect.
Me too. Okay. I always like to start business in the front, and you had a really exciting new venture unfold since the last time you were on the podcast. So tell us about Liberadiate and what you offer as a psilocybin facilitator?
Well, liberadiate is a combination of like liberation and radiating positive energy or whatever your inner sunshine is or what have you. It's like there's somebody in there that wants to come out and wants to be, themselves. And so, in my support of like our authenticity and finding who we truly are and then sort of being that version of ourselves and experimenting with what that feels like in life. Um, as a licensed psilocybin facilitator, that means here in Oregon, um, that means supporting somebody in their psychedelic journey if they so choose to take one. Preparing them for the journey with psilocybin, an intake process, a preparation process, the administration of the psilocybin in a licensed psilocybin services center. And then afterwards, supporting them with integration work. Usually there's two meetings where you work with somebody to integrate in the psychedelic experience, trying to make sense of it. So that's in its simplest form, what Liberadiate and what I'm doing through that lens.
Ooh, that's a very straightforward way of describing it. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Communication about the thing you do. You know what I mean? It's like a hurdle of figuring it out. Um, and it's legal in Oregon now to use psilocybin.
It is legal to consume psilocybin in a licensed psilocybin service center with the support of a licensed psilocybin facilitator. It is decriminalized here, although something just changed in like the last month that doesn't really allow for it. I mean, I don't really know exactly what they're looking for. I think there's a lot of other stuff to look at in this state here, but up until recently, it was decriminalized, consuming mushrooms and having them on your person if you didn't intend to sell them. So, but the legal pathway, the Measure 109 pathway, is to work with a licensed psilocybin facilitator and to consume in a service center.
So these are brand new hoops that you have jumped through.
Yes. Yes. I got trained at Intertrack and I now work with them, which is really exciting. But yes, there's a very specific set of things that everybody needs to learn if they're going to be a psilocybin facilitator. And yeah, lots to talk about there.
What tell me, like, what is it that you learn as a psilocybin facilitator? I mean, this is very different than like having your older cousin be your trip sitter, you know?
Yes. Well, there's certain skill sets that everybody should have. And the first thing, which is really actually kind of either comes naturally or it doesn't. And I think it can be trained, but if it comes naturally to you, it's so much better, is being relational, is understanding that there are interpersonal dynamics at play and there is a power relationship, if you will. Different relationships have different dynamics. And being self-aware and doing the inner work, the ongoing inner work that is required is really, really an important part that throughout the entire program, at least in Intertrack, is interwoven. So you never stop doing your inner work because your inner work is your client work. Your client work is your work. It's all relational. So that's really important. And then there's things like the history of psilocybin, really understanding like where it came from. It's an ancient medicine tool and how the current world in this like legal framework is honoring that lineage and that legacy, as well as embracing the newness of the way we're doing it today, and in a therapeutic space, in a controlled environment with support. It's so much different than going to like a music festival and taking mushrooms and crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. That's like,
Yeah.
and then thinking you're going to have a good trip, like, so back to the question around like, what are we learning about, like we're in the training, you definitely learn the bones of like what it is like, and where it came from, and paying your respects to that. Especially Maria Sabina, who
Less.
yeah, who, if you don't know who she is, like definitely suffered big time for introducing white people basically to the medicine. It was the first ever exchange where she shared that, and then it became this whole magic mushrooms story and Life magazine, and then all these people flocked to this tiny town that was not supportive of travelers. They weren't set up for that, and the neighbors and her community basically crucified her for sharing this information with white folks. And she died in, I think, 1995 at 91, like totally penniless. Like her home had been burned down, her son had been killed. Like, this is extreme. And like knowing and understanding like what happened here and how did we get our hands on this medicine to begin with as white folks is really important to know and to respect. So we start with that in our training. And next we kind of learn about like the whole intake process. And, I'm bouncing between like, into a window into the training, if you will. But the Oregon Health Authority is who manages this program, and it's different than the cannabis program. Cannabis in Oregon is managed by the OLCC, which also manages alcohol. OHA manages health-related things with Oregonians. And so it's an interesting shift in the way that it's dealt with. There are a lot of forms to fill out, and you will never hear the end of the word forms from everybody who is either a psilocybin facilitator or anybody who's gone through the legal route. They had to fill out a lot of forms because there's a lot of forms. But they're very important because they're all about consent and really understanding like what it is we're doing here. We are consuming mushrooms. What is our transportation plan? What is our safety plan? What is our health background? That's a really big, long form. But it's very important that we understand what factors are at play when we enter into this like psychedelic space, where we're preparing ourselves to be in relationship with the medicine when we're in there. And there's a whole thing we could talk about there. We also learn skills in relationship skills of like how we interact with clients who are in the medicine and what to do kind of in certain scenarios. Also, a lot of this is like 20% training, 80% intuition. You have the ways and the recipe that like, this is how we do journeys through this lens and through this Measure 109 legality. But then there's also like, people are people, stuff's gonna come up, and it's, the material is different for everybody, but I'd like to believe that everyone's coming to this because they want to be different, because they want to feel different. They want to feel different than they have for a long time. They want to shift a perspective. And I think it's true also for facilitators as well. Like we want to help people shift perspectives should they want to do that.
One of my favorite reasons for my own psilocybin use is just enhancing my neuroplasticity to level up all the efforts that I make in my self-care and my growth and healing because I know it helps. Like it just kind of, it's like unplugging and replugging the wires in your brain. I always imagine like fairies in there, like.
Yeah, I love all the different like nuances of how people can describe like what's happening up there, like technically and I'm really excited to like learn more about this and go down rabbit holes. But like our default mode network is what we're kind of turning the volume down on, right? So it's that part of our brain that like has everything real organized in nice little drawers, and it turns the volume down on that, turns the volume down on that like voice in the head, that's just kind of like talking at you, and instead it's kind of talking with you.
Mhm.
That inner wisdom. I also liken it to a new pair of glasses, like when someone goes on a journey and they kind of like they get a new set of glasses, whether they're the same color, but they're just different lenses, or they're like totally different shape, like you're still you, but you're looking through a different, a new, and updated perspective.
A new way of seeing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Okay, so you do work one-on-one. What is the process like when someone is having the trip day, right? Like I know there's a lot of forms ahead of time and then integration afterwards. But trip day, is it like laying in a comfy room with a blindfold on? What is the experience for the person having the trip?
Yeah. Well, I want to just say that there are two main ways to like journey, if you will. There's in like a a retreat or a community or a group journey where
Mhm.
you're doing it with other people. And I have two of those actually coming up this year. Um,
Links in the
and
show notes. FYI.
yes, in July and also October at Intertrek. I
Mhm.
am two women's retreats that I'm facilitating. Um, so those are a really beautiful opportunity to like do the work, do your own work, but also have some more support. And I can talk more about what the differences are between these experiences, but so that's one way. And then the one-on-one experience, there's very similar. So at Intertrek, we have a really beautiful service center, and there's like these handmade journey beds. And do you want me to like kind of paint the picture of like a
Yeah.
day?
Yeah,
Okay.
paint the picture. I'm
Okay.
so curious, like how this is all like coming together in the land of legalized plant medicine, right?
Yeah. So in the process, you would have like inquired, gone through a health screener, been approved to move forward by the director of safety, who goes through every single one of the health screeners to make sure everybody is like, either it's good to move forward, or maybe there's more work to do before moving forward, or maybe it's not a good fit at all. So once that happens, there is an intake meeting, and then there's a prep call where you're kind of just like flight instructions and like what to expect and just getting everybody prepared, talking about milligrams, really understanding what it is that we might want to do, talking about boosters if we're going to do one of those. Um, and I'll say that like all that's decided before you ever journey, like so you've allowed and discussed um and consented to what it is that you are doing, and that includes the milligrams of psilocybin. So on journey day, usually arrive in the morning, 9:30. um Pay for the mushrooms in cash because that's a completely separate experience, but the journey itself has been paid for ahead of time as well. Or
You can
the
put that on a credit card.
You can pay for the journey. The facilitation fee, yeah, you can pay for that on a credit card, but the mushrooms have to be paid for in cash.
That's so fascinating. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, it is interesting. Um, And the mushrooms include Oregon state tax. So
Naturally. Can't
yeah.
tax billionaires, but you can tax law-abiding citizens who just want their plant medicine. Um, I'm curious what the milligrams are on a typical journey. I know it depends on the health screener.
Yeah. So generally speaking, there are like three levels. There's, depending on how far someone wants to go. And there's like a lower dose. We talk about microdosing a lot, right? You probably talk about microdosing a lot. So that's not what this is.
Yeah.
Um, but there's a low dose, I would say a medium dose, and then like a higher dose. And generally speaking, a mild dose or a low dose would be like between like 14 and 18 milligrams. And these are packages that are purchased from licensed growers of psilocybin. And we actually work with Satori Farms, which is a woman-owned, mother-owned mushroom farm.
Love it.
Yeah, love it. Gotta love it.
Mhm.
And and yeah, it all comes labeled already and it's been tested in a lab. And that'd be super curious to have a conversation with somebody that works at one of the labs to see how it is they test it. But there is amount of psilocybin and psilocin, these are two different things, in the mushrooms, and they come up with one number to kind of lean on. And the packages come in, at least from Satori Farms, in like 3, 7, 9, and 10 milligrams. So if you're going to do a specific dose, you kind of add them up to then do the dose. So sometimes people have to open up 3 packages of mushrooms to like eat them.
And is it the actual mushrooms? It's not ground up into a capsule.
It is not ground up into a capsule. No.
Okay.
Satori Farms just started offering a grinded up version of it, but you literally take it out of the package and eat a mushroom.
Okay. Do
Yeah.
you, in your facilitation, do you like, because if I were to eat actual mushrooms, I would usually eat it like with peanut butter and chocolate to like help my tummy. Is that something you do, or is it like because it's a license we jump through hoops farm? It doesn't hurt your tummy the same way.
Um, well, we tell everybody that they should not eat at least 3 hours before the journey. So
Okay.
that's usually just waking up and not eating, but some people are early risers and, they can eat a little something, but 3 hours, you need that time to process the food. And it will, if you eat on an empty stomach, it will make it like less likely to be feeling nauseous. But it is easier on the stomach if you drink it through a tea and whatnot. So most people just eat the mushroom as is, and then we have like a little chaser. We have like a little dish that has like blueberries and chocolate and ginger. We have like a ginger tea. We have like a little ginger. Ginger is very helpful for making the tummy feel better.
Yeah, totally.
But generally speaking, most people have not, if they do those steps, they don't normally feel nauseous. Again, everybody and every body is different.
Mhm.
But yeah, so we have little chasers there as well. So
So they consume the medicine, and then what happens?
yes. Well, uh I'll go back to the milligrams because I talked about the lower dose, but the mild dose I would say is between like 18 and 21 milligrams, maybe 20, up to 24 milligrams. And then I would say 25 to 50. 50 is the max milligrams that anybody can consume at one time on the
That's a
premise.
big dose. For people
That's
who don't know, that's they call it a hero dose, and there is nothing heroic about it. You do not need to prove anything with your drug use. I'm just going to say that as your big sister, Bevan. From it, let me tell you, you have nothing to prove. Go low and slow with everything, including cannabis. You can always get more high. It's very hard to get less high.
That's true. That's true. I guess a lot of people, what I hear, because I do exploratory calls, is, they have a lot of questions around milligrams, and they also may be coming from far away and they're like, I really want to get my money's worth. And
Yeah, see, more is more is a mentality that when I was drinking alcohol, would apply to cannabis. And that's why I didn't like cannabis until I stopped drinking alcohol. And then I learned that more is not the way you interact with any kind of psychedelic plant medicine.
Right. Yeah. It is very rare that someone is going to go that high. Most people who go higher are they're on SSRIs, and
Mm.
SSRIs can blunt the effects of psilocybin.
But you
So,
can still use them on SSRIs, but I would highly recommend having a guide to walk you through if you're going to have SSRIs with psilocybin or any kind of psychedelics, but yeah, psilocybin.
yes, that's why we have the health screener and that you fill out all the information about your medications that you might be on.
Mhm.
And then our director of safety actually goes through and, communicates with each person who's on the medications, making sure that they know either it blunts the effects. There are some things that um, that maybe it's not a good idea to do psilocybin with, and that's very important. This is why there's a legal pathway, because there's support for the legal pathway.
Yeah. I had a friend who had her first big trip, and our mutual friend was trip sitting, and so I just heard the story of like the SSRIs and how they interact with the psilocybin, and my friend peed herself, but she had a really good time, but she was so high she peed herself. So I think it's just helpful to know, you know, this
Yeah,
is why
I
we get
mean,
people.
it has happened to some people, and I don't think that's a normal, like all the time thing. But I think especially if you've had a baby or something, or you just have a bladder control challenges that it might happen. But it's I would say that that would be rare, but it has happened. Hmm.
Okay, so what happens? Okay, we haven't even gotten to what happens once you start.
Yeah.
You've done your chaser. Okay.
Yeah, so you've had your first dose, and then 45 minutes to an hour, facilitator would like check in and see if you want the booster that you agreed to possibly take. There's no pressure to take the booster, but you can. So what we do is we check in with them and say, like, how are you feeling? Are you feeling like you want more? And intuitively, people are like, no or yes. Like there's no middle ground. They know when they know. It's really interesting. um, so they'll either take that or not. And actually, by the way, facilitators aren't allowed to give the mushrooms. They have to be given and by a licensed worker permitter. So that person has to come in with a tray and give the mushrooms and make sure that that person consumes them or doesn't or whatever. And that's a part of it. But facilitators can't touch the mushrooms legally.
Fascinating. So it's just more people making money off of this endeavor.
Well, I think there's like, it's kind of like, um, not necessarily that way. There needs to be somebody who's watching the service center, who's holding space. We actually call it our liminal liaison because they are like the person on the other side. It's kind of like, you know, I guess what we used to call it togativity, like third eye crew, like watching out, making sure they're supporting the facilitator in case they need something like water or like, if you need to call for help or whatever. I don't know anybody that's had to do that, but that's what that person is really there for. And to also, they're the ones who have to log into the state of Oregon website and log the milligrams. And, I think it's interesting because they're just finalizing their rules right now, and they're going to be slightly different
Hmm.
based on what they've learned from Oregon and you know, what they think should be done differently. So that's gonna be interesting. They literally just finished the rulemaking within the last 2 weeks.
I'm always fascinated, just as someone, a former attorney, just like the way I say we as like lawyers, design laws to make jobs for specific people. Like the entire residential real estate industry in multiple states on the East Coast, it designed to give more lawyers jobs. So it's just funny. when I hear more people having jobs, but I actually I get it, and I'm gonna use the third eye as a facilitator. Watch it. We were calling it safety sister in the goddess sisterhood, but now I kind of like third eye.
Yeah, that's what we used to call really like the women who were like, yeah, watching out, like making sure everything was all good, making sure there's no one alone, like just it's kind of like it's different in this space. But I do think it's a necessary thing. Like facilitators are there to focus 100% on their client,
Yeah.
and the worker permit person is there to focus on the logistics of the medicine.
Mm-hmm. That totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. Okay. So
So now we're back at the part.
sister. We're the sister now. Okay.
Yep. So for this facilitator, I mean, which perspective do you want?
I want it from your perspective, but then
Okay.
also like what the experience is. I like want anyone listening to this episode who might want to fly from around the world to come visit with you, Lisa, to understand what this experience is going to be like. And then we'll go through a retreat.
Okay. Yeah, so there's headphones, and there's also in the Inner Truck Service Center there is speakers, and both are playing the same music. The facilitator decides like what music is played, but we have curated lists that are specific for journeys of like coming up, you're at the peak for a little bit, and then you're coming back down, and the music is made to support that process. And music is so important to the process, you wouldn't think it would be. And we have people who are like, can I just bring my own playlist? And it's like, it's actually not ideal if you know what the music is going to be, if you have an emotional attachment to it, because like you're there to do your work, and that can be kind of distracting.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I would say very distracting,
I'm
actually.
very much a Bill Evans gal while I'm tripping in the woods, but I don't go that high.
Well, everyone has their things.
Everyone has their things, and you just got to figure out what works for you. And when I'm
Exactly.
doing this, when I do a DIY trip, for me, I'm like focusing on the five senses and setting myself up for success, cleaning my house, doing the dishes, just like the thing, because the regular everyday things take you out of the journey, right? And so it's kind of great to have like a third place to go, third place meaning not work, not home, like to go and have the journey curated for you. Okay, so we've got
Yeah.
music. Be
Well,
ahead.
set and setting is so important, right? And
Yeah.
it's like your mindset where you're at in the beginning of the journey, and the setting is like where you are. And so in like a container, in a safe space where you have somebody who's going to help protect your body, keep you safe, and support you if you need things, that's what a facilitator is really doing. They're not directing your journey, and they're not curating your journey really. They are curating the music on some level, and they're making sure that the space is comfortable for you, but like you're the inner healer. Your inner healer is here inside of your heart space, and it's like basically you and that person inside having a conversation. So when somebody's there, they have their headphones on, they're listening to the music, they bring their own eye shades, and they just go in. And some people really kind of forget that they're here physically. That's why we're here to like make sure that their body stays safe. And some people kind of dip in and out. They're like, whoa, what's going on out here? What's going on in here? It's like two different worlds. There's a physical world, and then there's the internal world of what's happening. And I recently had a client who she was and she is retired, and she was kind of looking for what's next in life, and a lot of really interesting things like came up for her during this process. And you never know what material is going to come up. You can talk about it with your facilitator ahead of time, but there's also things that might come up. And if our intention is to like have a good life, like we need to really be looking at what's holding us back, what's keeping us stuck, what kind of emotional experience did we not play out all the way because we had to keep ourselves safe and comfortable or what have you through that time period. There's a lot of old stuff that can come up, but it's there to be looked at so you can make room for having a better life, feeling more liberated inside, which can play out outside too. So depending on the amount of milligrams, is how long the journey is. And so, for example, a 25 to 34 milligram journey, which is something my client's going to go on Saturday, which is why I have it up top of mind. It's 5 to 6 hours. So it's kind of nice knowing like this isn't forever.
Mhm.
And at some point in time, you're going to come out on the other side. And so I can't explain or, you know, try to think about what happens for people, except they're going in there to do that inner work. The volume is going down on the ego. The volume is going down on the default mode network chatter, and clarity comes forward, truth comes forward, authenticity comes forward, unknotting things that have been knotted up for years comes forward. um and then it could be as simple as shapes and colors, like doesn't all have to be this deep experience. For some, very, very rare, like nothing happens. And that's very rare. And that could be for a couple of reasons. Sometimes people don't want to let go and just hold on, and they're protecting themselves. And that can be one of the things that happens. Or it just wasn't the time to do it. And again, like I said, that's very rare, but it's very important to know that not every journey is going to be like this most amazing thing where you got all the answers to every single problem. No, it's going to be like an awareness of what it is you need to listen to. What's the message? So it's a lot of that. And what I did last week was like I took some notes for my client about like what was coming up for them so I can bring it back around. I can remind them of things if they forgot or if they didn't remember. And at the end of a journey, um there's some light snacks and getting grounded a little bit, and it can take a couple of days to get back to earth, if you will. It's recommended to make a little bit of space a day or two after a journey to like rest, stay hydrated, eat some food, not require yourself to do a lot because you just shuck up the snow globe
Yeah.
and the snow is like slowly coming back down. So that's kind of the arc of a psilocybin journey day.
I love it. So what is it like on a retreat, or what do you have planned for your women's retreats that are coming up?
A retreat is a 3-day experience where on a Friday we do a low dose, and then the Saturday we do a full dose, and then Sunday we have an integration day. So it's kind of getting used to the medicine. How does it feel? That's really helpful for especially people who've never done it before. Um, or they're like not certain how their body's going to react to it. So maybe somebody is on SSRIs, they or they're just very sensitive. They're like, I can't eat gluten and lavender makes me break out. That kind of person might need less. And this is kind of the opportunity to like experiment with that. So, yeah, there's some conversation that happens beforehand. There's a opening circle, and low dose, I would say, is like somewhere between 6 and 14 milligrams. I would probably for the women's retreat go lower, like more like 7 or something.
Mhm.
And then yeah, the full dose day is kind of how I explained, like how a one-on-one would be, but it's in a space where there are others in journey beds, but everyone's there to do their own work. Nobody's going to be interacting with each other. And um it's not something that we like encourage. And in fact, if it happens, we're kind of like, okay, like come on back to your work. We have had a handful of people who have done some custom journeys. This isn't like something that was scheduled like on a specific day for others. We had like a mother-son come in who did a journey together, and they did their own work, but then towards the end of the journey, they were both like interacting a lot with each other. And in that sense, it was like really good for their relationship, but that's not something that we would do necessarily in the women's retreat. It's more about doing that inner work. So, um, and then the integration day is like where we take our journey and we start to weave in like, what did it feel like? What did we see? What do we want to remember? What kind of thread do we want to pull on from that journey? What did we learn? What do we want to know? Um, so we'll be using like art and creative expression for interweaving into post journey space, if you will. My co-facilitator Amber is amazing, very excited. We went to school together and we both have different colored hair. She's got blue hair, I got red hair. It's really fun. um that we have these just like, I saw her in school and I was like, I need to know her. Um but yeah, that's like a little bit about how that's going to go. Of course, we'll like get a little bit more dialed in and we'll also allow for some flow. I think like integration day is a good flow day. And integration day we'll also have lunch together. That's something that we'll do. So, little window into the
I love
world.
that. Okay, so I am curious if everyone in the retreat is taking the same, I know it's from the same farm, but is it the same strain or does everyone get kind of custom dosage? Or I mean custom dosage that I understand, but like are they getting, you know what I mean? Like I feel like there's some magic when you take the same medicine with a group of people and then you heal together, even though you're doing your own journeys.
I'm with you on that. Everything for the most part will just get one strain, like in a exchange, if you will, from Satori Farms, at a time. So everyone's doing the same strain, but it is the milligrams is definitely different per person. I would say in general, like on the lower dose day, everyone's doing a lower dose. On the higher dose or the full dose day, everyone's doing a full dose. And that's a full dose for them.
Mhm.
It would be a little different if like everyone was doing a full dose and someone was like, I'm only gonna do 3 milligrams or something. Like, I don't think that would happen, but of course we would be aware of that and kind of like figure out what to do there. It is ideal if everyone's sort of like in the same zone, if you will,
Yeah.
energetically.
I love that because I really do think there is something to healing in groups that like is different than healing by yourself. And like it's like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I have been in coaching cohorts before, like even just retreats, like one-off things where like you witness someone else's healing and it unlocks some stuff in you.
Yes, I would love to talk more about this.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, what you just said, I think is the most important part of it all because what I've witnessed is in community journeys, in the prep sessions, and also on the day of, there's something that happens for somebody, and we only can really heal truly in relationship. Like, there's so much work we can do ourselves, but it really is about healing in relationship. So, even though these people, you might not know them at first, you get to know them, and something in them sparks something in you, and something in you sparks something in them. And there's like this magic that happens from that place. I did some shadowing for this women's retreat in April, and one of the women was like, in one of the prep calls, she said, I really I want to really like get in touch and in tune with my inner child. Like, and this is actually a lot of the work that ends up coming up anyway. We're children once and something weird happened and carried it over to an adult life, and the child is in the driver's seat. um so of different parts of our lives. And it affects us differently. So she said, I really want to get in touch with my inner child and be more playful. I'm not very playful. And I would like to be more playful. And this other woman was like, she teared up and she was like, oh my God, I didn't ever think about that. I don't think about the part of myself that's not playful, but I want to be more playful too. And who knows what would have happened if one of them hadn't said something to everybody, if that would have even stirred up. And that became kind of like an energetic theme for both of them, is looking at that wounded child and working with her and holding her hand through as an adult with support. That's so different than when we are younger or vulnerable and don't have the support. That's the additional thing of having a facilitator, is to have a healing experience, a corrective, I'll say corrective in quotes, but a hopefully corrective experience where you're able to have someone like literally hold your hand as you are having these feelings and thoughts.
Yeah, having support. Yeah, I really think there is something to the healing experience of doing it together. I've gotten a lot
Yeah.
out of microdosing cohorts with the same strain and out of group trips with friends, like it's someone asked me like how do they like they keep seeing the Sphere in Vegas. I kind of want to talk to you about this too because you went in. But they kept seeing things about the Sphere in Vegas and the Dead and Company run of shows there. And of course I'm thinking about it because I'm a big Dead and Company fan, but she was just wondering like where are all these people getting their drugs? And I'm like, if they're smart, they're getting them from their friends. But if they're really smart, they're thinking very critically about the choice to do psychedelics in a big crowd in a desert where you're already fighting hydration. Like there's nothing that dehydrates me faster, knock on wood, than like doing plant medicine. And so like that plus Vegas to me seems like, and plus a crowd seems like not a great place for psychedelics. Allow the experience to be the psychedelic experience. But getting good drugs is usually a thing for friends, right? Like you go to someone you trust and or you do it the legal way and like go through forms and pay for
And go through the support of knowing that someone who's trained to do this work, versus like your friend who's just like, yeah, you got great conversations that you have, but do they know how to deal with, you crying uncontrollably for extended period of time if that's something that comes up, or like help you move through a loop that you're kind of stuck on. Like there's things that can come up that a trained facilitator can assist with, versus relying on somebody, because that's actually like very vulnerable if you're doing psychedelics and you're with somebody that doesn't have an experience, isn't trained, or you're in a group setting where you're not supported whatsoever. It's like that's where the quote bad trips happen.
yeah, you don't have a place to lie down and be under a blanket. Like good luck to you. It's anyway, yeah, the facilitator way I think is the way. um but because I was thinking about this not long ago, my first time using cannabis when I was 10 or 21 years old. Like I did not have someone who like it was just like good luck, like they didn't know what they were doing. I would love to go back there. I would facilitate that entire experience differently just as a layperson, but who has had now some cannabis experience. And so like let alone like fooling around with psychedelics. Tell me about the experience of going into the Sphere.
Let's talk about the Sphere in Vegas.
Uh-huh.
Uh, well, I was at MJ Biz Con this past November. I guess it was early December. Um, and everyone's been talking about the Sphere, they spent like a lot of money. I want to say like $1 billion or something, really. And I don't know. I could be exaggerating, but Google it, see how much. It was a lot of money. To build this like basically like this huge dome with video outside and inside. And I found out about it because U2, I think they like launched, they were
Yeah, I think
there.
the first show was you too.
That was so cool. Like I can imagine seeing a concert there and having it be insanely amazing. It's very immersive. So there's all these like AI robots that are outside and you can interact with them. I highly recommend, if you want to interact with them, doing it first, because when you leave, they will not let you interact with the AI robots. Everything is off. They just want you to leave. So talk to
Mm.
the robots if you want to ahead of time. Um, but yeah, the theater is like actually inside, not 360. I want to say it's like almost all the way around, because I mean you have to have seats in there, so it's like
Yeah.
energy part of it. But there are haptics. And we watched a film that was about the future and people going back to Earth because now we can't live on Earth because we didn't take care of Earth. Now we're living somewhere else. And now we're remembering what Earth was like. And so that's the journey that we took on this film that was made for this sphere. It's very specific to the space. So we traveled through the woods and through the desert and through the mountains. And then there were like animal experiences close up. The sounds in there were like so much like this animal's like right there. And then my like this most memorable, actually there are two very, very memorable moments. There was the elephant that was like stomping forward, and when it stomped, the seats moved, and you actually physically felt scared that this elephant was going to step on you. It was really interesting because you know you're in a theater, but it's like, it was coming right for us. And then there was a giraffe too that kind of not as scary as an elephant, but there was also a thunderstorm that we were in, and I swear there was wind. I don't know. That was like the extra part. I felt my hair blowing, and it was like, and it was like actually scary. Like you were like, are we gonna make it? Like it's so weird how your senses can kind of trick you into, yeah, being somewhere else.
Oh, I love it. One of my friends was calling it like one of the human wonders of the world, like this sphere. So I'm excited to hear more reports back from the field. Um,
Yeah.
Tell me about okay, you had talked about talking more in the relationship with mushrooms. Like, because I think they are such good relational teachers, right? Because like a colonial ontology, the reality in colonization is very transactional relationships, and indigenous ontology is more relational relationships. And I think that the the mushrooms have wisdom, even non-psilocybin mushrooms have wisdom to give us, right? And so like there's wisdom in there, but like tell me about your vibe on relationships with mushrooms.
Well, it's interesting because last night we have a every Wednesday class for our current cohort at Intertrek, and last night was like history or the beginning of the history, so it's like very fresh right now. And something about some of the like art that was around that had mushrooms in it has included ideas around kind of like the connection to mushrooms and different religions. And everyone has their own thing they believe in, and I support whatever you believe in. Um, but there's this interesting thought that um, that the mushrooms like were part of Jesus. And now I'm not saying this is what I believe either, but I'm
No,
just
this
saying
is
this,
first a new one for me. I love it.
yeah, no, this is really interesting. That potentially like this whole like peace and love, love thy brother, love thy sister, um, do unto others as others would do unto you, like whatever. I'm very generalizing Jesus's teachings, but like that it was because like they did mushrooms and that part of the mushrooms are Jesus, and like there's just like this whole thing. And interestingly enough, in order to protect um this ancient wisdom, there was like a period of time where it was like attacked, and like anybody who was ever doing it was like killed, and like there was just like this whole thing that happened. And but in Oaxaca they hid the medicine in the mountains, and they hid it behind Christianity, and that the cross is a symbol of Jesus, and that no, sorry, the mushrooms, and that Mary, which is like very much like in the culture of the Mexican culture, um, is uh what is she? Maybe Mary is the mushrooms, and the cross is, I don't know. I'm like getting it all mixed up right now. I'm like, I'm just relearning some of the stuff myself of like the religious part of things and like how it was protected and whatnot. But the relationship with the mushrooms, it has this like almost ancient slash alien vibration. Some people say that like cannabis feels feminine. Some people say ayahuasca feels feminine and that mescaline feels masculine. Um, it's interesting because mushrooms don't feel like they're either, and but they do feel like alien. And some people say that they might have come from another planet and they're put here. Who knows? But but it's interesting. My client last week, when she was consuming it, she said, "This reminds me of taking the wafer at church." And I
Mm.
was like, oh, that's interesting. Like when you are in that religion and you're eating the body of Christ, that is what you're consuming. And it is like this spiritual kind of experience, no matter what religion you are or not, it is consuming something that knows more than you, which is really interesting. You're consuming an access point to more wisdom internally that nobody can really even explain 100%. There's lots of science coming out now, but nobody can really explain what actually truly happens inside each individual person. So it is about the relationship of like, you know, these mushrooms, you're consuming them, they're being processed through the body and the mind and the bloodstream and everything, like in the physical. But you and those mushrooms are having a whole relationship inside. And some people, I talked earlier about the inner healer and your inner wisdom. That is part of what you're experiencing, but you're also, and some people would say maybe it's the only thing you're talking to is the wisdom of the mushrooms. And I'm fascinated by it. I don't know how it's all happening, but um it's a very important relationship.
It's called communion because you're coming into union with Christ. So I kind of love that you're coming into union with the medicine you're taking. And you know what? Like I just read this great book called Raise Your Vibration by Kyle Gray. And he talks about just blessing your food before you eat it and like how that raises the vibration of it. And so like remembering that like you can revere everything as a communion, because you are integrating it into your body. It's the information your cells are going to use to become the next unfoldment of themselves. And um, certainly psilocybin is far bigger impact than, mac and cheese. But, depending on what's in the mac and cheese, I guess.
Oh, there's some good mac and cheese out there.
Yeah. Um, Tell me about your career pivot and like how you decided to become like, because you have done many things, including bomb web design and tech stuff and community building and startups and all the stuff. And now you're a psilocybin facilitator.
Well, I do wear many hats. And what's interesting is like the idea of a career pivot. And what is a pivot? Is it an addition or is it something completely new because you're not doing the same thing anymore? I mean,
I think it's any turn in the road. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be a pivot, isn't like a 360 or 180, like a pivot can just be like a 2-degree change. But I think life is frequently asking us to pivot and then we like stall and stall and stall. And then eventually the turn has to be bigger because we ignored the course corrections, right? So anyway, now you're jumping through legal hoops and becoming a facilitator. So I'm just curious, like what that process was for you so that can help other people who are kind of facing like, oh, maybe I want to change.
yeah, well, I've done a lot of really interesting things, a lot of digital work, a lot of work in cannabis, a lot of women's work. And one thing that sort of like reigns supreme for me internally is that like ultimately like I am a spiritual person and I really feel like I'm here to, I'm here to help support the liberation of women. Like I feel like that's very clear to me. And people, like people who want to feel better. Um very simply. And I want to be an active participant in people if I can, and I'm not perfect and I'm not for everybody, may help support them feeling better if I can and if they'll let me. That's the other thing too. It's like I'm just not going to be like running around being like I'm here to help you. Like it's a two-way street, you know? So I fully accept that awareness about that. But when I was 24, I took myself on a trip to Amsterdam and I did mushrooms the first time. I bought them legally as truffles in one of these little stores you can do it. And I thought I was going to just like eat some and then go to the Van Gogh Museum and like see stuff. Like I didn't do any research, but I ended up staying in my hotel room for 6 hours talking to myself. But it was like 6 hours of therapy that could have been 6 years. I processed the death of my father. I mean, that first wave of grief, I had just lost him, you know, within a year and a half. I processed what I felt like was an abusive relationship. And my career path, actually. I was working for a production company in Manhattan, and I was like, I need to get out there on my own. Like, I got a lot of clarity from this experience, and I got a lot of like internal shifts. And I went back after that physical trip and the emotional trip, and I ended up leaving my job, like with everyone's support, into the unknown. And it helped me to be more brave in knowing who I am and who I want to be by releasing the past. It made space for my future. So that's always been in my mind, that experience. Another mushroom experience I had was very different. I was at a music festival and I did not feel safe. And I ended up climbing into my tent and thinking I was going to die.
Hmm.
Um, in fact, I prepared. I was like, I'm sorry, friends, you're going to find me dead. Like, this sucks. But right after I was having these thoughts, my dad came to me in spirit form and told me that my mom wasn't going to be here much longer. I needed to spend more time with her. So I got real serious about that. I had a birthday party, invited my mom to it, and she left that party not feeling well and was diagnosed with leukemia that weekend. And so I thought that information from my dad, and how did I know it was him? I just like felt it. It was weird. It was like, it felt like a warm hug from him. And I hadn't felt him in so long that when I did feel him, it was like, this is him. So I took that information really seriously. And these pivotal moments with my relationship with mushrooms have always been in the background of like so much of my growing up as a young adult into full adulthood. And in the work that I've been out there doing, with women's work and events and working with people online and stuff like that, it's like I just want people to feel better than they did before. And I want them to like know themselves well so that we can all have like a better life, because the better we feel, the better life we can have access to. So um there was this event called Horizons, and it's based in New York, and they were doing it for the first time out here. And um a friend of mine from cannabis, actually, Nate Howard, was there, and he worked at Intertrek, and he was like, hey, good to see you here. And I was like, hey. And I didn't really think much of it, but when I was there, I was like, I realized that this could potentially be something that I did in my life, which is like new ways of getting access to this really important medicine and helping people change their lives if they want to. So there's so much there, but if we're just talking about mushrooms and my relationship with it and how it all kind of came to be, so much has happened since I applied to that school, and my life is like totally different now. Um, yeah, now I work for Intertrek, and I am a facilitator through Liber 88, and I love this work. It's really fun and beautiful. And I'm still doing toketivity somehow along the way.
I love that. And I love that that you're so passionate about this medicine. What's your dad's name?
Michael.
Michael. What's your day-to-day like spiritual relationship with him?
I feel, well, both my parents are deceased. Um, but I feel like I have a relationship with them. It's changed form, that it's more like asking for their help and guidance. In fact, my last mushroom journey, they came through together and they never come through together. And that was really beautiful. But they
What's your
speak
mom's name?
Joanne.
Joanne. Okay, Michael and Joanne came together.
They did.
That's cute.
In more ways than one. um, yes. Yeah, so we I feel like we stay in touch. It's like with heart thoughts and feelings and things showing up and me asking for help in this life, and they show up and they show themselves. It's really very, it's interesting. It's hard to explain.
Of course, it's hard to explain because it's something that's more felt than talked about, right? I just like, I totally talk about grieving and my inner relationship with the folks who have changed form. Something I understand in the spiritual experience is that the more love there is, the easier for the presence to come through of spirit forms. And so, in the process of a psilocybin trip, you're turning down the ego, which is a block to love, and opening up to love. And so it totally makes sense that like a mushroom trip really facilitates that interaction.
It does. It absolutely does. I just had this like thought pop up that I wanted to just kind of add on to the like pivot, if you will.
Mhm.
I had actively participated in supporting Measure 109 by helping to support signature gathering at all of our events, sent out emails to our mailing list about it because I think that the women in cannabis have been very much more or less engaged and aware about how plant medicines can be helpful to you. Um, we helped to get 63 Canamom names in the voter pamphlet. And
Wow.
um, which is like, if you don't have a voter pamphlet, it's like the thing that we get in the mail here in Oregon that's like, here's what's going on and here's who's for this um bill and who's against it, etc. So you can read more about it and educate yourself. Um, and so I kind of was like saw this pathway opening up in a really beautiful way that was set with a lot of intention. It wasn't made by people well, let me rewind. It was made by people that believe in this work. It was made by people who believe in the healing capabilities of mushrooms, understand it from the inside out, and want to help people get access to it.
I love it. What's happening with Toketivity right now? Like, are there any events coming up or anything people can be on the lookout for?
Yes, we're actually, I don't know when this is coming out, but we're actually hosting a throwback Pride event in New York City on June 29th.
Cool.
Um, I'm throwing it with my friend Tanya from the Canna Diva. We actually know each other from New York City like 15 years ago when I was hosting this well, I co-founded an organization called Paradigm Shift, and we used to have like these, empowering feminist workshops and events and stuff. And she was one of the guests at the workshop back in like 2009, 10, 11, somewhere around there. So it's gonna be so fun. We're gonna have music. We're gonna have like smoky headshots. We're gonna have brunch. It's gonna be like a 4-hour spread, and it's gonna be so fun. And then afterwards, we're gonna go to the Dyke March.
Oh, I love it. A good lingering brunch and then the Dyke March. Uh,
Exactly.
that sounds really great. Lisa, thank you so much for being on my podcast again. It is just such a pleasure to be your friend and to share your story. And I really hope that folks out there are inspired to connect with you and go on a facilitated journey.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. Um, Hit me up if anybody has questions about this work. If you want to come to one of our upcoming retreats. The women's retreats I'm doing are July 12th through 14th here in Portland, and October 8th through the 10th. Is that true? I was like, oh, 6th through 8. Sorry. October 6th through 8.
Oh,
Uh,
yay. And right around your birthday.
what's that? Oh yeah, right around my birthday. Yeah, my birthday is October 15th.
Huh?
When's your birthday? You're a Capricorn, right?
Yeah, December 24th.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Early Capricorn.
Early Capricorn during the party of Sagittarius, really. So,
Yes. Well, you get to like have both sides there, it sounds like.
I do. I do. My birthday being on a holiday, I just really like I celebrate all December and all January. We're just gonna keep the party going. Why not?
I love it.
Yay. I love you so much, Lisa.
I love you too. Thanks so much for your curiosity and for having me.